But when I say that it took Spanish flu 5 years for the economy to recover, it means that if you're 100, that's your index. It went down. It went back to 100 after 5 years. No? And so,
Wow.
so while the GDP in the Philippines is predicted to grow next year,
Mm-hmm.
but do understand the context is it's gonna contract this year. If 100 is the base, it's gonna contract. Then it's gonna grow, but it will never reach the 100 index.
Yep.
So and that's assuming it will grow, no?
Mm-hmm.
Because the second wave is going to come out, and that's the reason why I hope people will still understand the need to take precautions.
Hi everyone, we are back once again with a very, very special treat for all of you. We have, in my opinion, one of the greatest entrepreneurial minds in this generation. But not just that, not just very, very good in entrepreneurship, but with the heart to share it to so much Filipinos out there. We have Josiah Go, CEO, chairman of Mansmith, back in the podcast. So, welcome back, Josiah.
How are you, Marvin? Thank you very much for inviting me back. At naulit tayo, ha?
It's an honor, no, yung the depth of insight on how you share and break down things. That's amazing, and I believe a lot of Filipinos can learn from your experience. We've been 9 months into lockdown.
Okay.
How are you so far? How has this experience like for you? I know that prior to this pandemic, you've always been on the go. You've always been out. You've been speaking everywhere. What shifted from your day-to-day routine?
Well, in fact, the last 9 months, we have 9 launches in 9 months.
Whoa.
We had more launches. There's a reason why, because in Mansmith, we have four I's, no? Information, ideas, inspiration, and infrastructure. And we put it on ourselves. We have to inspire a nation that is so demoralized, a country that needs inspiration. So that's one. That's the reason why we have so many projects. We have the Marketing Inspiration Festival. Oh, na-feature ka nun, Marvin. We converted it, in fact, into a book called Rising. No?
Yep.
Which is
I have it.
Yeah, very good. Thank you very much for holding it. It's now available in Lazada and Shopee.
Yep.
And so Rising is in fact the first business inspiration book in artwork format pa, no? So there's so many opportunities. I launched the business model course, 55 videos. When everybody is trying to save on cost, we have launched something in 4K Netflix quality video. We spent for it. The pandemic had created a new way of me working and seeing things, that how blessed we are, and so we have to share what we do.
And I think this pandemic, since we're all at home, it also made me more efficient because the work that's done, you cut off on the travel, and it's easier for you to meet. Us doing this, we didn't have to go to a certain place and then prepare and everything. You can just plug yourself in a few minutes and then you're ready to go. As an entrepreneur, we've said this in the previous videos that you've been doing this for so many decades already. What was the hardest part for you for 2020? And knowing what you've seen, what you know now, what would you have changed or prepared for?
One of the things that I have discovered is that you may have good, excellent products, but it's not enough. You can have very bad business model. And that's the reason why many companies were not able to operate. And therefore, just to have a good product is not enough. You have to take a look at how you design your business. For example, channel can be one of the biggest problem is many companies were not allowed to operate because they're not essential. But if they're online, they can operate. But it was not adequate. But even if you're online, like the restaurants, but there's no dine-in, but they're still not allowed to operate. And then you start realizing their value chain should have added cloud kitchen
Mm.
instead of more branches, because cloud kitchen is a cheaper operation and can be located in the side street,
Mm.
cheaper rent. It doesn't have to be in a place where it's very expensive real estate. No? And supply chain was a problem of many companies. They realize now that they have to balance efficiency and safety. No? So, for example, they want it at the lowest price, so they deal with a few suppliers. But now they have to spread out and say, well, many got hit. No, they had no supply.
Mm.
So they said, now they have to reevaluate their policy on supply chain, which also got me thinking, Marvin. I think businesses should learn from 2020 and ask one basic question. If you cannot do what you're doing or what you have been doing well, what else should you do? Which is forcing us to evaluate our business and forcing us to take a plan B for our business. So, for example, moving forward, even spending patterns. So the spending pattern may not return immediately because the consumer's definition of what is essential has changed. You just look at the number of people without jobs now. Just look at the number of employees retrenched, number of displaced entrepreneurs, no? And number of entrepreneurs whose business has gone down in revenues. That's gonna force them to start reevaluating how they spend, and that's gonna have an effect to suppliers, purchase, etc., etc. So that's something that we have to take a second look at in terms of how we should be preparing ourselves, for the future.
It brought me back to the things that, oh nga, no, the things that we have been buying personally as a couple, shifted. We barely would buy items for the house because we were not here most of the time. But now my wife sees every nook and cranny that can be either upgraded or that will make her life better. She keeps buying items on that regard, even from things that we did not consider before. Air filters, things that make you sleep better. I think those have shifted also in that perspective. But I like what you said also in terms of the cloud kitchen model, and I think there's a larger impact of that also in terms of real estate. There will be a shift on where people will be placing their offices also, because the space might not be as important anymore that you put it in the center of the city.
Yeah, and talking about even offices, no? And sometimes some of them just need temporary offices because of social distancing. Because right now you're still required to have social distancing. But a year from now, 2 years from now, maybe you don't need it anymore. So in fact, there was a school that asked me, how should I operate my school? Because students now are doing online classes. But we have physical infrastructure. We have a school. So I told the school, see, the problem is that you think of yourself as a school, you need student. But I look at you as a physical infrastructure, so you can rent out to offices that needs temporary offices, because you can only give it away temporary too. So there's a good fit, no? So why don't you convert the classes into offices? Allow people to work in classrooms, and at a cheap price. I'm sure companies would love to have a good temporary office, because guess what's in a classroom? You have a table and you have a desk. That's all you need on a temporary basis.
Looking at it from that perspective, no, and you seeing different crises also, given that a vaccine has been at least implemented in the UK and people are a bit more optimistic, you said that it would be temporary. How long do you think this will drag on until maybe consumer confidence starts to come back to 2019 levels, and then other businesses that got hit may start to at least emerge again?
One is that Spanish flu took us, took 2 years for it to be gone. And the vaccine of Spanish flu took 25 years to come out because they had to make sure it is safe. And I'm not very sure if we can have a vaccine that we can say the safety is within a very acceptable limit, world standard. I hope we can have very good standard, because in the rush of things, we don't want to compromise. But I'm sure the pharmaceutical companies do not want to risk their name for it. The third thing that the second wave killed more people. We had four waves, and the fourth wave was really a small wave. The COVID, the second wave, is starting to happen in some countries. They're starting to lock down. Because overconfidence, people are going out again. They say, yeah, vaccine will be there. And that's the reason why I said, well, if vaccines are coming, the more you should not be overconfident, because you don't want to get hit just before the vaccine comes out. The last thing I want to tell you about the Spanish flu is that it took 5 years to recover, for the economy to recover. So to answer your question on COVID, how many years will it? Of course, the prediction is we're going to be really negative this year. Not as bad as 1984 to 1985, because we had 2 consecutive years. We had double dip recession, 2 consecutive years of negative 7.4, 7.3, which means 14.7% contraction in the economy. But when I say that it took Spanish flu 5 years for the economy to recover, it means that if you're 100, that's your index, it went down, it went back to 100 after 5 years. No? And
Wow.
so while the GDP in the Philippines is predicted to grow next year, but do understand the context is it's going to contract this year. If 100 is the base, it's going to contract, then it's going to grow. But it will never reach the 100 index.
Yep.
So and that's assuming it will grow, no? Because the second wave is going to come out, and that's the reason why I hope people will still understand the need to take precautions. And I'm not saying you should just stay at home. I'm saying you should take precautions.
Given that all of these things are changing in the economy, I know you started to introduce a business model map. How relevant is it to the times, and why did you make this?
Business model map is a visual one-page map. And about 15, 16 years ago, I was the first qualified, certified Filipino in Blue Ocean Strategy. I brought it from France to the Philippines. And I got used to a visual way of thinking, looking at a canvas, looking at a map. That's number one. And then the second thing is I had a new course called Market Driving Strategy. And there was a 7-step process. But the 7-step process is about having a compelling business model. So I asked myself, okay, what is a business model? So I decided to design a business model with 11 business model building blocks. No? And so based on my orientation of Blue Ocean Strategy, the visual, the canvas, the map, as well as the 7-step, the need to elaborate on business model. So that's what I did. The next year in 2010, in June, I launched the first seminar on business model innovation.
What makes it so different to other popular business models?
I look at the building blocks of some authors. And of course, you read 10 books, 10 different people are talking about different things. One author said there are 4 building blocks, and there are, there's so many things. And I credit Alex Osterwalder for making this model very popular. He has 9 building blocks. His book came out at about the same time that I launched my first business model innovation seminar. I added value chain, and I added reconfiguration for innovation. And there's a reason why, because of my orientation in Blue Ocean Strategy. And because I really like the value chain and really believe in the value chain concept of Michael Porter in his book on competitive in designing a business. How can you design a business without reconfiguring for innovation? The COVID crisis has in fact shown us that companies who are not innovating is going to be left behind. Companies that innovated ahead of them. Look at Union Bank. They're way ahead now in terms of digital because they did it even before the COVID crisis. You can stay at home. You can open a bank account. You can download the app. You can open it in 10 minutes. You can deposit a check without going to the bank. Anything less than 500,000 pesos, you can do that because they were prepared ahead of time. And so if you try to decode what they have been doing, reconfiguration is like a blue ocean concept of create and eliminate. No? But it's not just blue ocean. Earlier, even Jim Collins, Good to Great, has mentioned, what will you stop doing? But even much earlier, perhaps the original idea came from Peter Drucker, who said, well, you know what, the first step to growth is not to decide what and how to start, but what to abandon. It's the purposeful abandonment on what do you have to stop doing. And that's the reason why we have to ask ourselves. It cannot be we keep on buying our clothes and then our cabinet is full. We don't remove, we don't stop. We have to keep on having that exercise. So what do we stop doing? So reconfiguration for innovation is not innovating the value chain, but innovating in terms of what is the logic of the industry that needs to be changed. Because everybody else follow logic of industry. In fact, my criticism in marketing is you see beautiful advertising. But what happened after beautiful advertising is they're still competing in a red ocean. No? They still compete where everybody kill each other. And because the logic of industry is the same. But if you look at the logic of strategy, which is to stand out, you want to stand out in a different way. If you look at innovating value proposition, you're different in a different way. I mean, you have a different product, you have a different advertising, but the way to operate is the same. But if you look at the whole business model, and if you look at start and stop doing, the logic of industry has been changed to logic of strategy, that you become different in a different way. You see the difference? So that most companies are not truly differentiated because they are differentiated in the same way. They're not differentiated in a different way. And that got me to discover that there are really 4 levels of differentiation. The most basic level that we have been brainwashed by Western books is that, marketing mix. You can get differentiation in marketing mix. And I said, yeah, that's only the first level. The 4th level of differentiation is really your business model. The first level of differentiation is your marketing mix. The second level of differentiation is your market segment. But that's very marketing function. You have business level differentiation. 3rd level is market driving. You're unserved. You serve the unserved market and you can be monopoly of that market because you're the first. And then you look at the 4th, which is your business model differentiation. You're different. You operate different. Look at Union Bank. They operate different. And so this is a classic example of being different in a different way. Not being different in the same way as you look at many other banks.
Knowing all of this and using this, how can firms improve their profitability by using your business model map? But I also want to segment it that there may be also entrepreneurs that they're thinking we may not be too big to relate to this. How can it also help them?
Yeah, whether they're a small company, a big company, doesn't matter. No? You can use the 11 building block. In fact, I used the 11 building block. One time I showed the 11 building blocks to Mang Inasals in Japsia a few years ago. And I said, in Jap, I decoded what you're telling me because we had, several conversations. I showed it to him and he said, this is in 1 page. This is what you have been doing. And of course he added, this is my target market has always been the Jollibee users,
Mm.
those people who go to Jollibee. And so, I just revise it a bit. But, the whole 11 building blocks is valid. But the whole 11 building blocks can be, if you, from a conceptual standpoint, you can subdivide into three. In fact, that's what business models are for. No? It's about value creation, value delivery, and value capture. And to your point, so how can the business improve their profit? How can they be benefited? How can small companies be benefited, big companies? Because there are only three things. Value creation is what I call the offering model, which is really composed of 5 building blocks: target market, value proposition, channel, customer bonding strategy, and your revenue model. So you start asking yourself, how am I creating value? Because if you're not creating value, you're selling a product, forget about it. Nobody's gonna buy your product. You must create value. And if people don't buy you, maybe it's a question of maybe lack of awareness. All you need to do is your customer bonding strategy, activate it. But the second thing is value delivery. So your first part is correct. So you have value creation. The second part is your value delivery. And so you start, and this is called the operating model as opposed to offering model. And the operating model is composed of 6 building blocks. You have the value chain, which is the step-by-step activities. How exactly are you going to make the value proposition happen? And beyond the supply chain, which portion will create value? That has to be planned ahead. In the case of Mang Inasal versus, let's say, a single restaurant in Iloilo, anybody can be a small enterprise, single store, provincial, no aircon, a parking area, because that's what Mang Inasal is all about. Parking area, no aircon, small company. And so he went into franchising, and that franchising gave economies of scale, among other things. And franchising also, the economies of scale allow him to purchase products that are much, much cheaper. Because as a small company, I have seen how small company use a 9 building block. And I said, so how exactly are you going to build value for your company using my 11 block? Because it forces the entrepreneurs to identify how they're going to create value beyond the value proposition, which is absent in the 9 building blocks. So franchising will reduce the cost, and because it will reduce the cost, you avoid what is called the law of double jeopardy in entrepreneurship. Double jeopardy is when you have a lower price and a higher cost. And so if you have economies of scale, you solve your higher cost. And the second value creation and value chain is branding. So you now have branding in your value chain, but branding is not supply chain. That's the reason why I said value chain and supply chain are two different things. Supply chain is part of value chain, but branding, part of value chain, is part of value chain is not supply chain. Supply chain is product-based, value chain is strategy-based. And many people get confused with that and say, well, but that's part of value chain, and that should be part of channel. I said, no, it's not. It cannot be. It has to be totally separated. And it has to be beside value proposition. So you have your value delivery. So you have your value chain, you have key processes. And key processes are different from value chain, because value chain is the forest. Your key processes are the specific, the important trees. Not all trees in the forest are important. Some trees are more important than the others. And these are key processes. Very critical. In hospitals, for example, you don't follow process, some people will. You get it? And in some businesses, you don't follow certain processes, there will be leakages in your cash flow. Then you have your key resources. You have your complementers who will help you. You have your reconfiguration for innovation. And finally, you have your cost. You have your 6, part of the operating model. But there's an overlap, because the overlap is the last part of your offering model is revenue. The last part of your operating model is cost. But when you combine it, that becomes your financial model. So if you look at value creation, value delivery, it always ends with value capture. How are you going to make profit? And so you look at it, you want to have profit, there are only two ways. You increase your revenue, you reduce your cost, or both. You want to increase your revenue, which is value creation. Look at your value creation. You want to reduce your cost, look at your value capture. That's the reason why many companies are now automating. They can reduce their cost. They can remove more human interaction. So why should I buy your product? That's a key question. What is the pain point that you are trying to solve? Like I've seen some people are selling adobo, selling whatever that is. It's so easy to cook. And so you start asking, so why should I buy adobo? It's so easy to cook. But if you say, oh, I'm selling kare-kare, I'm selling, 8 treasures chicken, which takes a long time to cook, then I understand. You are solving the pain point of saving time.